Well, guys, they did it. Facepunch officially killed their own game. It's time to pack it up and go back to gmod, I guess. Nah, but for real, Facepunch said they were gonna revoke people's access to Sandbox shortly before the release, and lo and behold, they snapped their fingers and actually did it a couple days ago. And out of the 800,000 players that were registered, only 40,000 were able to keep their access. At least a good portion of those accounts had to have been bots or accounts with access that people were trying to sell for a quick buck. And yeah, I actually do feel bad for the people that were really invested into Sandbox and still got revoked. So if you managed to survive the purge, congrats. But honestly, that topic is for someone else's video. Today, I kind of want to make a follow-up video showcasing where Sandbox stands currently prior to its release coming up next week. Stuff like the current top 5 games and games that I'm keeping an eye on. You know, just something to look back on as the platform develops over time. And like I said in the last video, Sandbox isn't going to replace Gary's mod at all. Like, there were people commenting as if gmod was freaking revoked from their library as well, and they're never going to see it again. So if you're here expecting this to have everything that gmod does, save your 20 bucks, go back to playing gmod, and give Sandbox time to cook until it's actually worth buying. Or just wait out the 2 years when it becomes free to play and hopefully more season. Or you know what, don't even play the game at all, just stay in gmod. So as of this recording, these are the top 5 games of the month before the official release of Sandbox. And yeah, you honestly hate to see it. Some of these I don't even want to cover, nor do I think you'd want to see it too, but it's a given when you have a lot of freedom on a platform like this. As more creators start submitting their projects though over time, this list would most likely change in the future. But for now, this is what we have so far. Looking at the number 1 spot, we have DXRP, which, let's be real, it's just dark RP, but with that shiny Source 2 look to it. Not much to say about this game since we already know the format, but other than that, the people there were pretty chill, and that made it all the more enjoyable. When it comes to games on Sandbox that try to bring a gmod experience to the game, you're obviously going to have a lot of nitpicky criticisms and comparisons, but I'd say this holds itself pretty well for what they had to work with and what it's supposed to be. I can see why it's been sitting at the number 1 spot for a good amount of time, but I just hope that we actually get some competition at the top that separates itself from the gmod identity. Judging by the title and thumbnail, you already know what this game is going to be like. Here we have Sand Miner, our first introduction into the Sandbox incremental games genre, where you basically turn your brain off, dig a hole for materials, turn them in for money, and use that money for little upgrades that you can use to speed up the digging process, or just gamble. When it comes to these kind of games, I have to be in a certain mood to play them, and there are way too many of these games on Roblox. So honestly, if you've played them, you're not really missing much here. Other than that though, it's an alright game for someone who has the time and the patience for this. Okay, this one I'm pretty ashamed of playing, but it had to be done just for the video. Mega Shot is one of those games that feels like it's using blueprint strategies to keep the player's retention for the play fun, such as daily login rewards and quests that leads to getting a cheap skin by the end of the week. I feel like this game was up at the 3rd spot because of people trying to farm in-game hours, as well as trying to get their hands on a skin to avoid getting their Sandbox access revoked. The gameplay is basically a roguelike shooter where you gather XP as you kill monsters, and as you level up, you choose one of 3 perks. On paper, it sounds like a neat little game, but when you actually play it, you could just feel that it was made using AI. Unless Megashot actually improves and removes all of the shady stuff, it's really not for me, and I wouldn't recommend it to a newcomer of Sandbox. Okay, at the number 4 spot, we have something quite interesting and definitely different from a lot of the other games on this platform. Although not very realistic car driving is a pretty solid foundation so far. The gameplay is pretty simple. You just drive to earn money or do side jobs like taxi driving, which can be spent on better cars, upgrades, and stuff to personalize your car. It also has a time trial mode so you can race across the 11 different tracks they have, which are not that bad looking. I'd imagine this being one of those games that you can listen to music while driving and trying out the different cars. Personally, I found it somewhat enjoyable for a bit, but just like in Sand Miners, my attention span is too fried to dedicate my time into this. It's still worth a good try though. So the common low effort genres I keep seeing so far in Sandbox are idle clickers and gambling games. But here, some random developer thought, hey, why don't we just merge the two together, creating Clicksino? Honestly, I'd rather have one of these than a million of these. This is the type of game that for sure herds cattle. To earn money, you have to constantly click this button, and then you can spend that money to make this process easier with upgrades. Or you can just gamble it all away with the selection of games. There's some solo ones you can do like Plinko, slots, roulette, blackjack, and minesweeper. And then there are also ones you can engage with other players in, like poker and coin flip. I can see why this game made it to the top 5 for this month, because to be honest, for someone who isn't really into games like these, I'll admit it, it's not bad. Now, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on it, but it's really an interesting take on the idle clicker genre. So now that we got the current top 5 games out of the way, I do want to cover some of the games I've enjoyed myself while playing Sandbox, because in my opinion, the majority of the top games would not be the best introduction to Sandbox. Like I said in my last video, you kind of have to do some digging to find the gems. And I'm only going to cover the ones that people rarely cover on other channels, so stuff like Dark Descent, Ghoul Grounds, and Sausage Survivors 2 aren't going to be covered here. Also, these games are not in any particular order, and I feel that all of them at least deserve some love and attention on release. Alright, so this first game we have is pretty addicting if you're into managing colonies. Inspired by the hit indie game RimWorld and a title that would have people questioning what you're playing, we have Piss World. You basically start your game out as a survivor with randomized stats and have them survive in one of the 5 types of biomes of your choice. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, but it's still pretty difficult. The fun part about this game is the random dynamic events that happen in the world. So you'll have events like meteors crashing on your land, random airstrikes, enemies invading your territory, and so on. And these events and worlds are completely randomized, meaning that no 2 players should have the same journey from beginning to end. And as your colony grows and develops, the game will also become more difficult, as each survivor in your colony will have different perks and different weaknesses. Surprisingly, Piss World only has 6 reviews as of this recording, and I feel like it definitely deserves a lot of attention and feedback. The complexity and depth that this game provides is pretty freaking sick. I even lost track of time myself just trying to get some footage of the dang game. I highly recommend it. The concept of this game is new to me, but I found it pretty cool. Shoot House is one of those base defense games where you have to survive 10 whole nights of these creatures trying to break into your mansion, with each night getting harder than the last. It's a pretty simple premise, but what I was surprised with is what happens after the night ends. When the night ends and the sun rises, you get thrown into this menu where you have the option to upgrade your guns, your defenses, and open up other areas of the mansion that you can defend from. You just have to be aware of the time and your character's energy, because once that gauge is down and that time is up, you'll have a harder time surviving the night. And every time you die, there's also meta upgrades you can unlock that'll improve your aim, energy efficiency, and so on. With this little resource management side of the game, I can see people taking different upgrade routes and experimenting with different strategies to survive, and I think that's pretty cool. The game does get harder as more nights go by, but when you survive them, they feel very rewarding. There's also an endless mode, which I haven't tried yet, but I'd imagine it'd be pretty difficult. Co-op's also implemented, so I feel like this game would be pretty neat to play with friends. Shoot House may not be for everyone, but I would still advise you to give it a try. On release, I can see this one holding a good amount of players. If you've ever played Ace of Spades in the past, this is basically that, but a modern take on it. From the creators of My Summer Cottage, Blocks and Bullets is your typical first-person shooter, but with none of that extra stuff like unlockables, ranks, and cosmetics. Just straight-up matches you can jump into right away, which is honestly kind of lost in this genre. To sum up the gameplay, you can build and destroy structures on maps that can hold up to 32 players, which kind of opens up interesting ways to play the game. I'd imagine maps getting completely demolished by the end of a match with a game like this, and honestly that sounds pretty fun. Other than your standard team deathmatch and free-for-all, we also have a bunch of other fun game modes like Capture the Flag, Infection, Gun Game, Gib, and so many others. The gunplay and controls also feel very satisfying, and I feel like this will be one of those games that you'll lose track of time playing if you're with the right crowd. Blocks and Bullets is pretty dang enjoyable, and hopefully with the release of Sandbox, we'll be able to see some full lobbies. Alright, so obviously Sandbox is still at its infant stages right now. Like, the game hasn't even been out yet, and there's already people bashing on it and comparing it to titles that have already been out for decades. This platform is still fresh, and the games on here are pretty good, but I'd be lying if I said they were amazing. I'd imagine that the devs of these games are small teams to maybe even just one person. The engine's fairly new, and hopefully bigger teams will give it a try, and maybe we'll get some bangers on this platform later down the line. Even looking at some of the projects that people are cooking spoken up in the Sandbox Discord, I know for a fact that some of them will have a good chance to replace the ones that are currently on the front page. On the day of the release, I can most likely see Sandbox getting mixed to maybe even negative Steam reviews. Not by the devs, but by the players if nothing changes after this video. Hopefully I'll be wrong, but that's okay if I'm not, because time will honestly tell if the platform becomes great. And I feel like a lot of devs, 3D modelers, and mappers are trying to take advantage of this new opportunity by just jumping straight into it. But that's all I have to say for now. If you've watched this video up to this point, I am forever grateful. Let me know in the comments if you're one of the 40k players who still have their copy. And if not, are you still planning to buy it? I'll probably stream some Sandbox in the future, so if you want to chill and play some games with me, you can follow me on twitch.tv/Nomulee. Thank you so much again for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next video.